On the 13th of January, 27 BC, the most powerful man in the world stood up in the Roman Senate and gave everything away. The provinces, the armies, the treasury, the state itself, all of it handed back to the Senate and the people of Rome. And when he sat down, he was more powerful than before. This is the story of how that trick was done, and of the 100 years of chaos that made it possible. Start with the man at the center. By 30 BC, he called himself Imperator Caesar. He was 32 years old. Every legion in the Roman world, roughly 60 of them, answered to him alone, and the fabulous wealth of Egypt had just become his personal property. No Roman had ever held this much power. The question was no longer who would rule, it was what to call it. But to understand what he built, you first have to understand what he broke. The Roman Republic was a machine designed to stop one thing above all others, a king. Power was split, shared, and timed. Two consuls sat at the top, each able to veto the other, and each held office for a single year, then stepped down. Beneath them ran a ladder of lesser magistrates. Around them sat the Senate, a council of ex-officials with no power to command, only the authority to advise. For 4 centuries it worked, and then it worked too well. Rome conquered Italy, then Carthage, then Greece, then the whole ring of the Mediterranean. A government built to run a single city now governed millions of people across 3 continents, with no professional bureaucracy, no police, and no permanent arm. The constitution had never been designed for this, and its cracks were about to start showing. The first crack was land. Rome's wars were won by small farmers who served as soldiers, but years away at war ruined their farms, and the rich bought up the empty land and worked it with slaves. In 133 BC, a reforming official named Tiberius Gracchus tried to give public land back to the poor. For this, a mob of senators beat him to death on the Capitol. It was the first time in centuries Roman politics had been settled by murder. It would not be the last. His death split Roman politics into 2 camps that would tear at each other for the next century. On one side, the Optimates, the establishment, defending the power of the Senate and the old families. On the other, the Populares, ambitious men who bypassed the Senate by appealing directly to the People's Assembly. These were not political parties with programs. They were rival methods of doing politics, and increasingly, the method of choice was force. Then one man handed that fight a weapon that would end the Republic. The general Gaius Marius, needing troops, threw open the legions to Rome's landless poor, men with nothing. They enlisted not for their city, but for a career, and they looked to their commander, not the state, to pay them and to give them farmland when they retired. In a single reform, Rome's citizen militia became something new and far more dangerous, a professional army personally loyal to whichever general could reward it. It did not take long to see where that led. In 88 BC, a rival general named Sulla was stripped of a command by his enemies in Rome. So he did the unthinkable. He turned his loyal legions around and marched them on the city itself, seizing Rome by force. A few years later he returned, made himself dictator, slaughtered his opponents in organized purges, rewrote the constitution to strengthen the Senate, and then, remarkably, resigned and retired to private life. Within a decade, his settlement was in ruins and the ambitious men were circling again. Into that vacuum stepped a new generation of strongmen, bigger than any office. Pompey, a brilliant general who cleared the seas of pirates and conquered the East, celebrated as Pompey the Great. Crassus, the richest man in Rome, who owned much of the city and commanded armies of his own. The Republic still held elections, still seated its Senate, but real power was drifting to a handful of warlords with soldiers, money, and ambition without limit. And then a third man joined them, an ambitious, deeply indebted aristocrat named Julius Caesar. In 60 BC, Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus struck a private bargain, the first triumvirate, to carve up the Republic's offices and provinces between themselves. There was no vote and no law. 3 men simply agreed to run the state, and were powerful enough to make it stick. It was a sign of what was coming. The institutions were now just a stage, and the real deals were made in back rooms. Caesar took the deal and turned it into supremacy. Ended command in Gaul, modern France. He spent 8 years conquering it in a brutal war that killed or enslaved perhaps 1 million people. It made him fabulously rich, and it gave him something more valuable still, a huge, battle-hardened army that was devoted to him and depended on him completely for its rewards. Marius had invented the private army. Caesar now commanded the most formidable one in the Roman world. The pact could not survive success. Crassus died on campaign, and Pompey drifted to the side of the Senate, which now feared Caesar and ordered him to give up his army and come home to face prosecution. Caesar refused. In 49 BC, he led a single legion across a small border river, the Rubicon, into Italy, an act of open war against his own government. Civil war swept the Roman world, and at the Battle of Pharsalus, Caesar crushed Pompey. He was now the master of Rome. Caesar tried to do what Sulla had done, but this time without letting go. He pardoned enemies, reformed the calendar and the courts, and packed the Senate with his own men. And in 44 BC, he had himself named dictator, not for the traditional 6 months, not for a year, but for life. He wore the purple, sat on a golden chair, and let statues of himself be raised beside the gods. He had become, in everything but the hated word itself, a king. That ambition got him killed. On the 15th of March, 44 BC, a conspiracy of some 60 senators surrounded Caesar at a Senate meeting and stabbed him 23 times, cutting him down at the foot of a statue of Pompey. They called themselves the Liberators. They believed that by killing the tyrant, they would restore the old free republic. They were badly mistaken. But the tyrant had never been the real problem. The problem was 100 years of private armies, ambitious warlords, and institutions too weak to control either. Killing one man did not fix any of that. It simply removed the only person holding the pieces together and opened a fresh power vacuum. The assassins had no plan for what came next. Others already did. The one man with a plan was a teenager. Caesar's will revealed that he had adopted his 18-year-old grandnephew, a sickly, unknown youth named Octavian, as his son and heir. Caesar's seasoned lieutenants laughed at him, but the young man grasped one thing at once. He now carried the power of Caesar's name, and Caesar's name commanded the loyalty of Caesar's soldiers. He marched to Rome to claim his inheritance, and the veterans came to him. What followed was not a fight between the Republic and its enemies. It was a fight among Caesar's heirs. Octavian joined forces with Caesar's most powerful lieutenant, Mark Antony, and a third commander, Lepidus. In 43 BC, they had themselves made a legal commission to run the state, the Second Triumvirate, and they marked their arrival with terror, proscriptions, published death lists of their political enemies, whose property was seized and whose heads earned a bounty. Thousands died, including Rome's greatest orator, Cicero. Then they turned on the men who had killed Caesar. Brutus and Cassius, the leaders of the assassination, had raised a great army in the east, the last army that fought under the banner of the old republic. At Philippi, in 42 BC, the triumvirs destroyed it. Brutus and Cassius took their own lives, and with them died the republican cause itself. From this point on, no one was fighting to restore the old system. They were only fighting over who would replace it. With their enemies gone, the victors split the Roman world between them like an inheritance. Octavian took the west, including Italy and Rome itself. Antony took the wealthy east, and there he allied himself with, and fell for, the Queen of Egypt, Cleopatra. Lepidus, the junior partner, was soon shouldered aside and stripped of his power. 2 men were left, each controlling half the Roman world, and it was only a matter of time before one of them wanted all of it. The final war was won with words before it was won with weapons. From Rome, Octavian ran a brilliant propaganda campaign, painting Antony as a drunk who had gone native, a Roman turned slave to a foreign queen, ready to hand the empire to Egypt. It was unfair, and it was devastatingly effective. Octavian did not declare war on his Roman rival Antony. He declared war on Cleopatra, the foreign enemy, and made all of Italy swear a personal oath of loyalty to himself. The two sides met at sea off the coast of Greece, at a promontory called Actium in 31 BC. Octavian's admiral, the brilliant Agrippa, outmaneuvered Antony's fleet, and in the middle of the battle, Cleopatra's squadron turned and sailed for home, with Antony following after her. Their cause collapsed. Within a year, cornered in Egypt, both were dead by their own hands. Octavian marched into Alexandria, seized the treasure of the pharaohs, and stood at last entirely alone. So now, finally, we are back where we began, with one man holding everything, in 30 BC. And in front of him sit 2 great warnings from the recent past, 2 ways to lose it all. Julius Caesar reached openly for a crown, called himself dictator for life, and was stabbed to death for it. Sulla seized total power, fixed the state to his liking, and then actually let go, and died soon after, his whole settlement torn apart within a decade. That is the needle Octavian had to thread. Grasp too openly and you die like Caesar. Let go for real, and you fail like Sulla, leaving chaos behind you. He needed a third path, power that was total, but never looked total, permanent, but never called permanent. The groundwork took 3 years, and it was designed to look like a return to normal life. He shrank Rome's bloated armies from around 60 legions down to 28, discharging hundreds of thousands of veterans and settling them on farmland he paid for, pointedly out of his own pocket. The long nightmare of civil war was over. Rome could exhale. And each year, he simply had himself elected consul, the most ordinary, respectable office in the state. In 28 BC, he went further. Together with his indispensable right-hand man, Agrippa, he held a census, formally revised the role of the Senate, and annulled the illegal emergency measures of the Civil War years. In his own later words, he restored the laws and rights of the Roman people. The message was crafted with enormous care. The crisis is over, the Republic is coming back, and I am the man giving it to you. And he wrapped it all in spectacle. He celebrated a magnificent triple triumph through the streets of Rome, parading the wealth of his conquests. Then he did something the Romans had managed only twice. In 700 years, he ceremonially closed the doors of the Temple of Janus, the ancient signal that Rome was, for the first time in living memory, completely at peace. The exhausted city adored him for it. This was the mood in the room on the day he rose to give it all back. The 13th of January, 27 BC. The Senate House is full, and a great many of the men in the room owe their careers, their fortunes, and quite literally their lives to the man about to speak. He rises, and he makes an announcement that, taken at face value, is the most extraordinary act of self-denial in the history of Rome. He tells them he is laying down his extraordinary powers. He is returning the provinces to the Senate. He is returning command of the armies. He is handing the entire Roman state back to the Senate and the people of Rome. He is, he says, finished. Just a private citizen once more, having restored the free republic he had fought so long and so hard to save. And the Senate erupts, not in relief, but in something close to panic. The senators beg him not to abandon them. They implore him to keep carrying the burden for the good of Rome, to remain at the head of the state. It appears to be a spontaneous, heartfelt outpouring of need. It is also, almost certainly, arranged in advance, down to the very last cry. Why would everyone play along with a performance they could all see straight through? Because every person in that room had a reason to prefer the fiction to the truth. The senators kept their dignity, their offices, and their heads. Octavian kept his power while shedding the ugly title of warlord. Both sides quietly traded a dangerous truth for a comfortable story. That trade, repeated 1,000 times over, is the real foundation of the Roman Empire. So Octavian allows himself, reluctantly, to be persuaded. As a favor to the Republic, he agrees to shoulder part of the burden a little longer. He would personally take charge of the provinces that are still unstable, the ones with enemies on the border and armies in the field. The peaceful, settled provinces he leaves to the Senate. It sounds like a modest compromise. Watch very carefully what it actually divides. To see the machine clearly, line up what he surrendered against what he kept. On paper, the list of things he gave back is long and genuinely impressive. The list of things he kept is short, but in politics, weight matters far more than length, and everything heavy is on the short list. Into the give-back column go the genuinely dangerous things. The emergency powers of the Civil War years, surrendered. The personal oath of loyalty that all of Italy had sworn to him by name, released. The calm, settled provinces, where little could threaten anyone, handed to governors the Senate would choose. All of it real. All of it truly given up. Now the short column. He kept the consulship. That is nearly all of it, and it sounds harmless, because the consulship was just an ordinary elected office that 2 men held together every year. Except Octavian had held one of the 2 consulships every single year since 31 BC, and he fully intended to keep right on holding it. An ordinary office, made extraordinary by simply never letting go, and carrying with it the lawful power to command armies, the Imperium. Then comes the division of the provinces, where the real sleight of hand lives. To the Senate went the calm interior, Africa, Asia, and Greece, rich and peaceful and prestigious. To Octavian went the single vast frontier command, Spain, Gaul, and Syria, with Egypt as his personal domain. On paper, he had taken the harder, more thankless job. In truth, he had taken the only one that mattered, because the real difference between the two lists was never prestige, it was soldiers. Here is that difference as a single picture. Rome had 28 legions. Around 20 of them stood inside Octavian's frontier provinces, under officers he chose and could dismiss at will. The Senate's provinces held a bare handful between them. He had handed the Senate a map and quietly kept for himself very nearly the entire Roman army. 3 days later, on the 16th of January, the Senate met once more, this time to thank him. If the first session had handed him his power, this one gave him something he wanted almost as badly, a brand new identity, wrapped in a bundle of honors that looked like gifts and functioned like a coronation without a crown. They voted him a cluster of powerful symbols, laurel trees to stand on either side of his front door, a wreath of oak leaves, the civic crown hung above it, the traditional Roman award for saving the lives of fellow citizens, and a golden shield set up in the Senate house itself, inscribed with his 4 great virtues: courage, mercy, justice, and devotion. His home was now a public monument. His character was now official state doctrine. But the honor that mattered most was a new name, and choosing it was a delicate business. Some senators proposed calling him Romulus, after the legendary founder of Rome, casting him as a second founder of the city. It was flattering, and it was quietly dropped. Because Romulus had been Rome's very first king, and king was the one single word this entire elaborate performance existed to avoid. Instead, they settled on a word that had never been used as a name before: Augustus. It came from the language of religion, and it meant something like the revered one, the one blessed and favored by the gods. It made him sound holy without making him sound royal. It carried immense weight and precisely zero legal meaning. From that day forward, Octavian was gone. There was only Augustus. Late in his life, Augustus described his own position with a lawyer's precision, and the sentence is worth memorizing. "I surpassed everyone in authority," he wrote, "but I held no more legal power than the colleagues who shared each of my offices." Read it quickly, and it sounds like modesty. Read it slowly, and it is the entire secret of his rule laid bare. Break the sentence into its 2 halves. Legal power, in Latin potestas, was the formal authority attached to an office. It was defined, it was limited, and, crucially, it was shared. Augustus was consul, yes, but another man sat beside him as consul too, holding exactly equal powers. On this measure, he was telling the literal truth. He held not one shred more legal authority than his colleague. Now, the other half. Authority, in Latin auctoritas, had no legal definition at all. It was standing, weight, reputation so overwhelming that your suggestion was obeyed like a command, and your mere preference settled an argument before it began. His colleague held equal power on paper, but when the 2 of them disagreed, only one of them was Augustus. That gap, all reputation and no law, quietly did the actual work of a monarchy. Picture how that worked in practice. A question comes before the Senate. Legally, Augustus has exactly 1 vote, the same as any other senator. But everyone in the chamber knows what he prefers, and everyone knows that the man who prefers it commands the armies, pays the soldiers, and can make or ruin any career in the room. So the debate is over before it starts. No command was given, no law was broken. His single vote simply weighed more than all the others combined. Authority alone is only a feeling. What made it iron was money, and this is where Egypt changes everything. Its treasure was now his private fortune, which meant Augustus could personally pay the soldiers' bonuses, personally fund the grain that fed the city's masses, personally stage the lavish games that entertained them. The public treasury of the state was often short of cash. Augustus, personally, never was. Follow that money, and you find the true structure of power. The soldiers were paid by Augustus, so their loyalty ran to Augustus. The people were fed by Augustus, so their gratitude ran to him. Ambitious young senators needed his personal nod to win high office, so they courted him. The Republic still had every one of its institutions. It was simply that every important thread of obligation now ran back to a single hand. And underneath all of it, always, sat the legions. Every soldier swore a personal oath to Augustus by name. Their pay, their careers, their retirement land all depended on him and on the officers he appointed. An institution can be voted down. A law can be repealed. But any senator who dreamed of challenging Augustus had to ask himself one simple, sobering question first. And then what? When the entire army belongs to him? The final piece was the story itself, and Augustus controlled that too. His face went onto the coins in every purse in the empire. His restored temples rose in every forum. His poets, the great Virgil above all, wrote Rome a glorious national destiny that ran straight through him. And the official word for everything he had done was never seized or conquered or took. The official word, carved in stone, was restored. For all its brilliance, the settlement of 27 BC had a flaw, and the flaw was the consulship. By holding one of the only two top offices year after year, Augustus was blocking a chair that the proudest families in Rome expected to take their turn in. His dominance everywhere else was beautifully disguised, but this one piece of it was rude, visible, and renewed every single year. It generated exactly the aristocratic resentment the whole system had been built to avoid. In 23 BC, the pressure finally surfaced. There was a conspiracy uncovered against his life, and then Augustus fell so gravely ill that everyone, including Augustus, expected him to die. And for one terrifying moment, the whole improvised structure had no plan whatsoever for what would come next. He recovered, but the scare had taught him a lesson. The settlement of 27, for all its cleverness, was not yet stable. It needed a second draft. The settlement of 27 BC, for all its brilliance, was not his last word. Within a few years, he would quietly give up the consulship that annoyed everyone, and take in its place two new powers that annoyed almost no one, and yet controlled nearly everything. That revision would make the disguise seamless. So let us step back and deliver a verdict. Was the Republic actually restored? Look only at the forms, the outward shapes of government, and the answer is a genuine yes. There were still two consuls elected every year. The Senate still met, debated, and voted. The assemblies of the people still passed laws. The courts still sat. Governors still governed. Nothing at all had been formally abolished. Every institution of the Free Republic was still standing. Now look at the substance, the reality of who actually held power, and the answer flips hard to know. One man commanded almost the entire army. One man paid the soldiers and fed the people. One man's authority outweighed every colleague, every debate, every vote. The institutions still turned, but now they all turned around him. The Republic had not been restored. It had been carefully preserved, hollowed out, and wrapped snugly around a single monarch. So why did this hold together for 40 years, when Caesar's naked grab for power got him stabbed within months? Because Augustus understood something that Caesar never did. Romans could not stomach being ruled by a king, but they could very comfortably be led by a first citizen who endlessly insisted he was merely their equal. Augustus did not take their republic away from them. He let them keep every single comforting piece of it, and asked in return only that they never look too closely at who was truly in charge. The bargain was not free. Real political life, the open and dangerous contest for power that had defined Rome for centuries, quietly came to an end. Elections still happened, but the outcomes that mattered were settled in advance. The Senate went on debating, but it had effectively become an audience. Romans traded their perilous liberty for peace, order, and a flattering story about themselves. And most of them, exhausted by 100 years of war, decided it was a fair trade. That is the achievement and the sleight of hand of 27 BC. Augustus assembled a monarchy entirely out of republican parts, ordinary offices held permanently, an ordinary command holding nearly the whole army, honors without powers, and authority without any limit. He ruled Rome for more than 40 years, and he was never once called king. Rome never crowned him. It never had to. From here, the question is no longer whether the empire will be born. It is what kind of men will inherit it.